This is Lisa from MobileTechReview, and come to my back room and see my watches for sale. Yeah, it's that time of year when multiple watches come out, so I get to test them. The Samsung Galaxy Watch 6 and the Galaxy Watch 6 Classic. So after taking a hiatus last year, ill-advised hiatus, no doubt, the rotating bezel is back in the classic model of the watch. I think that's what sets the Samsung watches apart from the other smartwatches on the planet, and people did love it. So happy to see it back. Other improvements, how big are they? We're going to find out now. So small price increase for this year, like $20 or so. The Watch 6 starts at $300. The Watch 6 Classic starts at $400. You're going to pay $30 more if you want the slightly larger size of each of those. And you're going to pay extra money if you want LTE. But not that much extra, only $50. That's not too bad. If you don't get them on with LTE, you still get Wi-Fi, dual band Wi-Fi at that, Bluetooth, and a GPS. And of course, NFC for Samsung Wallet, Google Wallet, that sort of thing. So what's new this year? Not a super lot. You know, that's been the story for Samsung products this year. But two things I think people like who are upgrading from older generations. Again, we're looking at tech that really generation, usually not so much of a reason, but if you're going from like you got a Watch 4 or something like that, then you're going to like it. Brighter display. Now that's something you might even like if you have the last generation. 2,000 nits. You can be in the sunniest place in the world and you are going to have no problem seeing that display. Last year's model wasn't that bad. Honestly, I didn't really feel disadvantaged, but well, insanely bright now. Also, 30% bigger display. And like we see with the Apple Watch, it's not so much that they're making the casings larger, they're making the bezels smaller. And if you're thinking about the Watch 6 Classic, the physical rotating bezel has gotten 15% thinner too. So it still looks like a classy men's conventional sort of watch design, but not as uber extra chunky. I think it's a good compromise there. Well, the selling point, honestly, between this and the Pixel Watch is, again, the sizes and the rotating bezel. So you have choices in sizes, whereas the Pixel Watch, which has grown into being a pretty good Android watch, Android Wear specifically, is only available in the 40mm size, right? As much as it might be nice, if you're a big person with big wrists, it just looks awful small. So the Watch 6 is available in 40mm, just like the Pixel Watch, and 44mm for those who like living just a little bit larger and seeing more on the screen and having it look better on your wrist if you got a big wrist. And the Classic has always been the beefier watch. So that's the smaller one is 43mm and the larger one is 47mm. So for our review, given the fact that, well, you can look at me and say I'm not the most beefy boned person, even though I'm a tall person, I'm not hugely boned. We're working with the 40mm Watch 6 and the 43mm Watch 6 Classic. So they can get bigger from there. Anyway, size choice is always an important thing to have. You still have the 20mm band with the pin style release, which is like really annoying if you don't happen to have fingernails for those releasey pins. So Samsung came up with a new band release system. It's got a button that you push and basically it pulls the little pins in. So these watches are still backward compatible with the myriad $10 cheapo bands that are on Amazon, so that part's great. But if you find those way too fiddly and you've shredded what's left of your fingernails trying to operate those kind of pin-based connecting systems, their push button makes it somewhat easier to put it on, take it off. I wouldn't say it's as super duper easy as the Apple Watch, but then again, if you're an Android phone owner, you're not really cross-shopping the Apple Watch, are you? So there's that. It's better. It may not be as slick as the Pixel design, but then with the Pixel bands, you're looking at about $50 a pop, not much in the way of third-party support. So again, $10 bands. In fact, this fake braided solo loop kind of band is one of those $10 ones that you can get off of Amazon. Now, the drawback is always that some of them are not so well made. They're usually pretty good looking, and I haven't had problems with rashes or material problems, but like this braided loop one has plastic connectors where it mounts to the stainless steel watch, which means that plastic is going to break at some point. So, but anyway, it's nice to have choices. If you go with the Classic, you get, and this has been the case in previous generations, you get stainless steel casing versus an aluminum casing. The aluminum Watch 6 basic model is sleek and minimalist. It hasn't changed much either. I think some folks are getting bored with it, but it is a lot lighter. It's about half the weight. So it depends on how much you like that feeling of weight on your wrist. Some people like the chunk, some people don't like the chunk. Again, probably going to be a gender divide. Gender divide comes in again when it comes to the watch bands, be they Samsung's own or even some of the third-party ones. They do tend, even if you get the small medium bands, to run very long. So like I have a 145 millimeter wrist, which is small but not unusually small either for a woman, and I'm pretty much using it, near the last loops always. It just barely gets small enough to fit me properly. Another thing about the design of Samsung's bands too, to add that little kind of quick release thing and to make it easy where it stops when it should stop, they're using some protruding rubber on the underside of the band, right? So that means that the band can't go down. You can see it on my wrist, what happens if I'm wearing even the 43 millimeter Classic, which isn't that huge a watch. The lugs and the way the band are designed push it too far out on the sides of my wrist. So you might have to go to an older style band or a third-party band just to not have that problem. Happily, at least Samsung figured out there were left-handed people a couple of generations ago, so now we actually have support for wearing it what you would call upside down if you were a right-handed person with the buttons swapped and all that sort of thing. We got Wear OS 4 on board. In fact, these watches are getting it before even the Pixel watch gets it. Well, go figure. So that's nice, keeping things up to date. And One UI 5 on top of that. It looks a lot like historically the Tizen watches, and that was never a bad thing because they made very friendly products before. There were many really good, friendly products on the market back when Google's own Bear operating system for watches kind of sucked, to be honest. But nowadays, it's really up to you as to which look you prefer. But I think most people will be pretty happy with that. When it comes to fitness stuff, not much has changed from the previous generation. We have a lot of sensors and stuff on board, like you have the body composition monitor. That's not new, but it's still there. And I got wildly different results. Two were fairly accurate. One was kind of high, for example, just testing in the first 5 minutes. And it depends on how moist your fingertips are. In fact, it'll tell you to go moisturize first, which doesn't give me a lot of faith. But the ballpark of the majority of readings, 66% there, as I kept doing this again and again and again, were reasonably accurate. Again, these are not medical devices, folks. They're just there to give you a ballpark and maybe to see your progress if you're using this for diet or fitness or something like that. Heart rate reading on this, pretty consistent and pretty good at picking up when I started an exercise right away. It would register. It typically reads about 5 BPM higher than other products on the market that I have used, though. So keep it in mind. And as a baseline, when you're using the same old watch, really that's what's going to matter more than the absolute value, probably. Also keep in mind, while these are compatible with any brand of Android phone, there are some features that are proprietary just to Samsung phones. The health monitor feature, for example, and also you can use this as a remote to control your camera, but only with certain Samsung Galaxy phones. And then there's a Find My Phone feature, which I find useful because I do wear a watch, so I don't have to take my phone everywhere and with me. And I'm like, where did I leave it in the house now? So that only works with Samsung phones. And since it's Android Wear, yes, you can use Google Wallet instead of Samsung Wallet, but you do have a button that is hard-coded to Samsung Wallet. But you can program one of the other buttons, a double tap or something, to launch Google Wallet if you prefer to use Google Wallet. And likewise, Bixby is still on this thing. Bixby is still on Samsung phones. We do not know why that is, but they're not giving up anytime soon, clearly, on Bixby. But you can assign Google Assistant to instead, and you can even voice activate if you want. You might have to go through some hoops, update the Google Assistant app, assign buttons to it, whatever, that sort of thing. So it's not the default. Let's just put it that way. They make you work a little bit for it. LTE coverage on this was just fine. I found the switching quite good between Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and LTE as it needed if I walked out the door and left my phone behind, for example. GPS signal acquisition under a fairly open sky takes a while still, just like last generation. So I say I go out for a 1 mile walk or run. It's going to take a quarter of a mile sometimes before it actually acquires GPS, which is behind the pack among smartwatches. That's not to say these are not good watches. They actually are. They're very enjoyable to use. They are compatible with any Android device, with just a few features missing if you're not using a Samsung phone. And clearly, versus the Pixel watch, you might not get that pretty pebble polished design, but you've got your selection of choices and the option of using the band, and still better battery life than the Pixel Watch. Samsung claims 30 hours of screen on time if you're using the always on display and 40 hours if you're not. And unless you're GPSing through the woods for, 10-mile hikes or something like that, that's pretty accurate. So that's pretty decent. That means even if you're using these for sleep tracking as well, which they do a reasonably good job of, other than deep sleep, which Samsung watches always seem to think I don't do at all. I would be dead if that was the case. Clearly that isn't true. Anyway, they do a good job. You can sleep through the night with them, top them up. They charge pretty quickly, 0 to 45% in a half an hour. Not bad stuff at all. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more cool tech videos, and thumbs up if you like this vid.